Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome. My name's Hannah Delmet, and I'm the Senior Director of Partnership Development here at Concordia. I'm joined by my collaborators, CJ Johnson from the Office of Global Partnerships at State, and Maggie Morris, who is part of the University of Virginia Darden School of Business Institute for Business and Society. The three of us serve as point leads on the P3 Impact Award, which is a amalgamation of brilliance from Darden State and Concordia, bringing together insight, best practices, and leadership to support the partnering ecosystem. After 6 years of hosting and holding the P3 Impact Awards, we decided it was time to take some of the best practices we've been honing and learning throughout the award period and some of the traditional challenges or obstacles that we've seen with partnerships across the world and bring these together to host the inaugural P3 Impact Accelerator. And we're so pleased to have this first cohort coming together, each representing very promising early stage partnerships that we could see winning the award one day. And we want to lend some of this best practice into your own work and your own strategy. So as mentioned, my name's Hannah. I'm just going to give a quick bit of housekeeping here so that we're all on the same page before turning over to Mary Margaret Frank and Brian Moriarty, who will be our guest lecturers from the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. So just a bit of the logistics side. We're all using the Zoom platform today. Some of this, for some of you, this might be new. Some of you might be experts at it by now, but just as a quick primer, on the lower left-hand screen, you will see a mute and a stop video button. Whenever possible, we encourage you to use your video so we can see your faces, how you're reacting to the content. It helps, especially with digital, if you have questions, so that we're not talking over each other, right? But we understand if you have to turn off your video for a certain amount of time, but please do turn it back on. Same with the mute function. We'll be on mute for some of the learning period to avoid background noise, but these courses are designed to be very interactive and engaging. So it's important that you're also able to turn off the mute function and ask your questions, participate, tell your story, and share with us, especially with today, which will be the first time we're all getting together and the chance where we're really hearing about the amazing work you're each doing. There is a chat feature at the bottom of the screen. We'll be using that chat throughout today's conversation. It will be a place where we're putting in questions for you to be considering while Mary, Margaret, and Brian are teaching. It will be a place where we're putting in useful resources throughout the conversation, and it will be a space where if you have any problems or need to troubleshoot or have an idea, you can quickly send a chat to the full group or direct to someone. We're also using WhatsApp, so if there are any problems, any tech issues, my advice is that you just send me a quick text message or a WhatsApp message, and I'll work with you on the back end to troubleshoot so that you don't distract from the actual session itself and you're able to be paying attention. And we do have our final partnership, Kristanos from Protege joining. So happy to have him in the loop. Welcome. And I'm just giving some quick housekeeping. So that's the main functionality aspect of this. There will also be a breakout room session of this program where you're speaking with each other and really applying the lessons from today back into your own work. Don't worry about that. We'll take care of it. So all you have to do is when it says, please join this breakout group, select OK and go to that breakout group. Again, if there are problems, just send me a WhatsApp. We also have Gabriel Barrientos, who is on this screen. For our colleagues from Argentina, he does speak fluent Spanish. I want to just make that known. So if you have a question, you can send him a note in Spanish and he'll be able to help. Okay, so we'll use the Q&A session. The other key thing that I want you to know is that this session is recorded. So the lessons will be accessible post-event. We'll also share the slides, so please feel free to take notes, but know that we'll be following up on Monday with resources for you to use as well. Finally, we're so excited to have you here. We will be promoting a lot over social media throughout this 5-week accelerator training using hashtag P3Impact. We encourage you to do so as well. Feel free to tag any of the institutions, including Concordia, University of Virginia Darden School of Business, and the Office of Global Partnerships at State. We will put those hashtags and relevant media handles in the chat function, but we want to keep that conversation public and online, and so others can hear about the great work you're doing and be excited about the power of partnerships for positive social impact. With that, I'm so pleased to turn over to Mary Margaret Frank, who has been a brilliant leader within the P3 Impact Awards space over the past 6 years, really one of the driving forces of why this award exists. And we're honored to have her and Brian come in today to lead this first learning module. Mary Margaret and Brian, take it away.
Thanks. So
Thank
can
you.
you all see?
Just one, sorry, I just wanted to do one quick little also reminder that this is a safe learning environment. Please take advantage of this time, either with us, with your colleagues. We want this to really be an opportunity to learn from each other, as well as the content that we promote. So don't be, bring up your challenges. If you have questions, along the way, please, we want everyone to have just a great positive learning experience. Let's go.
Well, I just want to, thank you for being here at all hours of the night. So it's nice to see the Brady Bunch. We call this in the US, we call these the Brady Bunch tiles. So if you don't know what the Brady Bunch is, you can Google Brady Bunch and you'll see what we mean by the Brady Bunch tiles. It's an old 70s TV show. So I want to welcome you. Really excited to do this with Brian. I want to echo the excitement just real quickly. To me, this has been one of the highlights of my career. Being able to bring, even in this fashion, what you could argue is a classic P3 between the nonprofit sector, Concordia, the State Department government, and while Darden isn't business, it is a business school. So to bring together those three sectors of the economy, of public-private partnerships, cross-sector partnerships, however you want to think about it. So again, I just want to thank you for being here. And I want to introduce my colleague, Brian, who is in our communications area and just a master of telling your story. Brian, I just want to... Yeah.
So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I had previously worked as well with the Institute for Business and Society with Maggie and Mary Margaret. Had never really been involved directly with this program, but I think it's just such a phenomenal partnership, such a phenomenal opportunity that I'm just thrilled to be a part of it today. As Mary Margaret points out, I'm very passionate about storytelling. I believe that storytelling is one of the ways that we not only transform the organizations where we are, but it's also one of the ways that we transform the world. So I was just really thrilled to see that this is the first. The topic for the first part of this program. So looking forward to it. Mary Margaret, pass it to you.
Yeah, and you're passing it to me, and we're seeing that I've just learned, don't touch your computer because the slides move as soon as you touch your computer. Okay, so let's back, this is, sorry, I was moving ahead and understanding that as I touch my computer, it keeps moving. So just want to start just at the beginning, just to sort of give you a sense of what our objectives are for today. You've got a whole series of events that you're going to be doing with this partner, with Concordia, with the State Department and Darden, but this is, for this one particular module, what our objectives are. So really, given this is the first one of the objectives was simply to get you to introduce yourself. And how better to do that than to get you to begin to start to tell your story. So that's where we're going to start. Then we're going to have a conversation, and our objective is about trying to get you to refine that story and think about that story as you project it to an external audience, and specifically about this interplay between the narrative and the numbers. How do you tell a story that's compelling that has both? Because different audiences might need narrative and or numbers to help them feel compelled to your story. And then finally, what we hope you leave with in the end is, it's not going to be a complete story, but that hopefully we've planted some seeds so that when you leave here, you'll be able to move forward to think more carefully and better craft that story that you're going to tell, okay? So this is just our roadmap real quick. What we're going to do is we're going to share stories first. Then we're going to go through what does it mean to do storytelling. And we are going to put you in breakout groups, okay? And then we're going to do some takeaways and look forward to and talk about your next steps forward. Okay. So, the beginning, sharing your story. There's a method to the madness, okay? So, when you were asked to set up the slides, okay, what we wanted you to do is use those slides to help prepare you mentally to think about what you're going to do right now. Okay, so you don't have to use your slide number 1 to tell your story, but what it was a brain exercise to get you to think about actively how you would do that. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to go around the group, and everybody has 2 to 3 minutes, okay, to tell your story. What we call this in business is an elevator pitch, right? It takes, depending on the size of the building, right, 2 to 3 elements. How do you get your story out quickly in a compelling way? So that's what our goal is for this next, well, for the next about 30 minutes or so. And then at the end, if we have time, what we'll ask is, were there any observations you made across the groups that sort of stood out to you? Okay.
And one thing that I would add real quickly is, don't have anxiety about this. Like Maggie said,
thank you, Brian.
this is a safe space.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't a test. It's just an opportunity to practice and get some feedback.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Do you see why I like working with him? Okay. So while people are presenting their stories, one thing you could think about as you're listening and engaging in active listening are these 3 things. Think about what do I like most about the stories that I'm hearing? What do I remember about the stories that I'm hearing? And then what could they add that would really make you stand up and go, I'm listening, and that it's going to resonate. So that when I leave this session, or when I leave the elevator, that's actually a better way, like when I leave the elevator, that partnership is stuck in my brain, okay? And makes me want to go Google it. It makes me want to go follow up with it. How do you create that quick narrative, okay? So what we thought we would do, again, remember Brian's lead-in, which is, this is just fun, right? Think about, we're in an elevator, you're introducing yourself and your partnership, and you got 2 to 3 minutes to ride all the way up to the top floor, okay? So we'll start, what we've got these is, we're just gonna pull them up, okay? And if we could start with the, I have a terrible accent. So I can say Anjasia, but I think I'm just gonna leave it at that, because I can go de, and then I am not gonna be able to pronounce the next word. And I'm just gonna leave it there and let our participants introduce themselves.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I have been late. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Crisanto Sondo. Yeah, my name is Crisanto Sondo. I'm here to reply some question that I can reply, because I didn't have time to prepare. I didn't have enough material to prepare. That I'm going to answer the question that I can reply. I don't have enough information, because we have problem here with the Wi-Fi, with the internet. Mm-hmm. This is the reason I try to meet Anne. I pronounce that. Is good pronunciation?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the reason. That's the reason that I didn't meet her. I'm here in Equatorial Guinea.
Could I make a recommendation? So how about we have Natalia present on her partnership, and you can see what the other groups are presenting in. And while they're doing that, that will help you then prepare as you think about what others are including into their bits. Will that work?
Okay, thank you. Okay,
perfect.
It's good. It's
perfect.
Okay.
Great. Natalia, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Well, hello. San Nicolas Development Agency is in Buenos Aires province, Argentina. It's a public-private partnership was forming the necessity of extending and diversifying the productive matrix of San Nicolas City, whose production is mainly metallurgical. The partnership started working in 2018 and defined 12 challenges and working cells. We encourage that public-private cooperation between the state, the companies, and the civil society organization in local and comprehensive development project to San Nicolas and the region to strengthen dialogue, networking, and democratic institutions. We think it is important because the projects that are aimed at at raising the human development of the city are promoting the competitive and equitable productive development and strengthening democratic and participatory leadership. Furthermore, when the public-private sector work together to achieve the common purpose, the synergy that occurs can generate a doubly positive result. This is a group of 70 public-private leaders who was trained at the business school of the Australian University. These projects are linked to 5 different axes: productive city, human and integrated city, sustainable city, hostess city, and agreement city. This partnership is going to address the challenge through the work of a group of these 70 people, together with the development agency working team that manage the operational, legal, and financial affairs. Well, the ideal information that is needed, we think, to illuminate the challenge is the successful of case studies in public-private cooperation, to look for funding, and, bueno, like this, the academic seminars also. We use some indicators and metrics to assess the partnership impact. For example, the number of public-private projects that we have implemented, more than 50. The creation of spaces for dialogue, the public funds initiatives, and the creation of corporate social responsibility programs between companies, with the development agency, and the civil society organizations. More also, the resources and practices that a good partnership needed to implement, we think, in order to collect the information, we think are determinate methods for collecting data, that, such as surveys. Well, this is just a brief speech of how the agency works in San Nicolas City. Thank you.
I'm impressed. 3 minutes exactly.
Yes, okay. Incredible for me too.
It's all good. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move to the next one so we can all get introduced, okay?
I think I have a lot of improv, huh? I know.
Yes,
thank you.
You got to go first, so now you get to sit back and relax, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, let's begin. Let's move on to Bioko. And it's Katie. Is it Katie? Are you going to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
I am. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this course. I'm really looking forward to all that we're doing, and I'm especially happy that I have homework to do. As a professor, I don't often have to do homework, so it's good for me. Thanks. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about our program. The Bioko Biodiversity Protection Program, or the BBPP, has been around for quite a long time, since 1992. And it's grown a lot over time, and it does different things. So there's a really big societal challenge that our partnership tries to address, and that's that there is a biodiversity crisis on Bioko Island, and more largely in Equatorial Guinea. And it's due to a lot of contributing factors. The university there is very young, and there's a lack of human capacity building there, just because the university is relatively young. There's chronic underfunding for natural resources management, especially in protected areas. And there's a lack of public awareness about the importance of biodiversity conservation. So all of those things kind of bear down on the importance of the project. The reason, like Bioko in particular, and this region is so important, it's one of the world's 25 original biodiversity hotspots. It's a really, this site is the island is an important part of the heritage of Equatorial Guineans. And what all of this, the challenges contribute to is that there are a lot of opportunities that are lost for capacity building and natural resources management and rural development that threatens and basically an irreversible loss of biodiversity. So as partners, we are a public-private partnership focused on the Drexel University in Philadelphia, the Universidad Nacional de Guinea Equatorial, or UNHE, headquartered in Malabo, and what is called INDA4AP, which is the Protected Areas Management Authority. We're funded by the Exxon Foundation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is a very diverse group of funders. And what we aim to do is that we promote cross-sector solutions in order to stop irreversible biodiversity loss while also producing two things. One is evidence-driven environmental policies, and professional capacity building, and also promoting sustainable rural development. So as a result of that, we are, I would say, pillars of the community now. We do lots of different things. We serve a lot of different needs. A lot of our activities were first for Equatorial Guinea. We run the first research station in Equatorial Guinea. We have the first international study abroad program. We have the first ecotourism program. Currently, we employ about 70 to 100 people. I could go on and on, but I will leave you with that. We can talk about that more later. You did ask us to talk about impact and additional resources. We certainly need better monitoring of impact on our conservation activities, on the impact of our livelihood programs, on local people, and the impact on communities. Additional resources, we need to improve our visibility. We need more opportunities for longer term professional training of university program graduates. We need more networking opportunities for our program graduates. And then finally, we need more opportunities for livelihoods building due to the unexpected success of our ecotourism program on Bioko's lovely southern shores. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, appreciate that. So I'm just going to write. So thank you so much, Katie. And let's move to Odin Foundation. Okay, all right, hit the unmute button.
Hi.
Hi, here we go.
Hi, Hannah. Hi, Mary. Desde el año 2005 y hasta la fecha de la presente, nuestra organización fundacional promueve la creación de un centro cultural e interdisciplinario de rehabilitación física y psicológica con refugio para la comunidad en general y en especial para mujeres con discapacidad como consecuencia de haber sufrido violencia de género, niños huérfanos por hechos de femicidio, víctimas por diversidad de género, personas de extrema vulnerabilidad social, ancianos víctimas de abuso, jóvenes solteras embarazadas y mujeres desplazadas o refugiadas de países limítrofes como Chile, Bolivia, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brasil y Venezuela. Centrándonos en tareas de formación profesional con proyectos educativos, sociales y culturales, teniendo en cuenta que el objetivo principal de nuestra organización es promover enfoques sistémicos orientados a la autonomía y equidad. Para ello, la Fundación comenzó a dictar, entre otras actividades, programas de empleo y servicios comunitarios destinados a víctimas de violencia de género, personas con discapacidad y comunidad en general, para promover la igualdad de oportunidades en organismos municipales, provinciales y nacionales. Realizamos con el Instituto Nacional de Tecnología, en un marco acuerdo, programas de mejoramiento de la salud y calidad de vida para víctimas de alta vulnerabilidad, eliminando patrones socioculturales que influyen en el desarrollo de la violencia. Desarrollamos un abordaje preventivo con el grupo de voluntariado social de los distintos departamentos que conforman el organigrama institucional, a los fines que operen como promotores referentes barriales ante situaciones de violencia y discapacidad en poblaciones de alta vulnerabilidad y riesgo social. Durante la pandemia del COVID-19, hemos implementado un plan preventivo de seguimiento y apoyo a mujeres desplazadas y migrantes que viven en zonas de conflicto ya que las mismas tienen un mayor riesgo de sufrir violencia durante la cuarentena obligatoria, aumentando de esta manera el porcentaje de víctimas en Argentina y América Latina. La violencia, el trabajo esclavo y la explotación sexual a nivel mundial y en particular en América Latina, con elevados niveles de violaciones y femicidios, es uno de los hechos sociales más relevantes, debido a un modelo de conducta característico de la sociedad subdesarrollada. Nuestro compromiso es elaborar y promover factores para reducir el riesgo que sufren las víctimas, facilitando mecanismos de ayuda e integración social. El reconocimiento de esta heterogeneidad contribuye a una real universalización de los individuos y de los derechos humanos, basada en el principio de la pluralidad y el respeto de las diferencias y la diversidad. Es imprescindible trabajar por el cambio del modelo de desigualdad desde una perspectiva cultural para mejorar la fórmula y prevenir la violencia, y nosotros como institución coeducadora actuamos en defensa de los derechos humanos, ya que discriminar, perseguir y no reconocer los derechos de las poblaciones más vulnerables atenta contra la paz. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Now I'm trying to figure out, we had a change and I want to make sure I'm still in control of the, it's fine, but I'm still in control of the video, I think, right? Making sure. So I think.
So you're in control.
Yeah, I was just going to share, I had the English written out, but we will share that afterwards. And thank you still for doing that, because I feel that this is still excellent practice for you to be able to go over what your story is as well. And we had just the overview of what the partnership is that people could read, but then we'll also share your overview that you sent to me as well with everyone, so everybody can learn more about it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So now we're moving on to the Program for Educational Development in Equatorial Guinea. So we have two from Equatorial Guinea. We can move with that and have the introduction there.
Hello.
Hey, there he is.
Hello.
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 I mean, can I beg something? Can I speak Spanish too?
I am more than happy to listen to Spanish. Someone will have to translate it for me. Unfortunately, I do not have that gift.
Because I have a lot of things to read here, but I can read all of them in English. That's the reason I asked if I can speak in Spanish too, because I have a lot of information here to give you.
Chris Santos, would you mind presenting now in English, but when we go to breakout groups, we will make sure that you and the Fundación Odin are in the same group, and then you can use Spanish for that. So do English now, but when we get into the real discussion where we're working with things, we'll have you speak Spanish then.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. let me tell you this, the short story that I have for the Program for Education Development of Equatorial Guinea. The story of program in 2005, between August to November, the organization Academy for the Educational Development, AED, arrived in Equatorial Guinea for the study and development of the action plan with the Ministry of Education, Science and Sports. In 2006, the President of Equatorial Guinea and John Hayes signed to an agreement of beginning and start the first stage of program of development education of Equatorial Guinea. The social impact that we have, that the partnership has, in the past, has been basic change for the improvement of the education elementary, preschool, and teaching leadership of the heads of department of the basic secondary education in the two states more than or more over 2,000 teachers without teaching education have obtained or got the certificate or degree of certified teacher of primary education and preschool. That's about 90% of the schools of the entire country use active methodology, mean teach with all items in the school and teaching methods. That's the short story that I can give you so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, and that was really good on time. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You.
Okay. Okay, let's move forward with our introductions. And let's make sure, there we go. If we could, Unspoken Smiles. Okay. We need to unmute. Unmute.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Jean-Paul.
Yes. Well, my name is Jean-Paul Laurent, originally from Haiti, but currently living in New York City. And I've been involved with Concordia since 2015. And I'm truly honored to be participating in the P3 Impact Awards. And congratulations to all of you also got selected for this very prestigious program. To make it short, there are nearly 3.58 billion people who are affected by oral disease, and it's one of the most overlooked health problems in the world, where people don't really pay attention to the impact of oral disease having not just on your teeth, in your mouth, but in the overall body. And it all started after the earthquake in Haiti while I was a student at NYU College of Dentistry with the goal to become a dentist. And I made a trip to Haiti after the earthquake. And the story, the smiles behind this child, despite the tragedy, the destruction all around, it really made me change my perspective, and really, it was at that moment I really found my calling. So when I returned back to the US, I made a decision to focus on tackling this issue and do it in a much different way, not as a dentist, because I knew that if I become a dentist, my focus will be on treating patients and making money. And so that's why I make a shift into the nonprofit sector, knowing that we'll be one of the very few organizations in the world who will be tackling this issue. And so I made the decision in 2015, but I didn't have the right knowledge to start a nonprofit. But so that's why I went to Columbia University to get a master's in public administration instead, to get the skills to run an efficient and effective organization. And it was the best decision ever, because from that moment on, we kind of grew the program from just Haiti to over 8 countries across the world to date. And the key things that we want to do is to really leverage the school resources to really educate kids, because knowing that for the next generation, all the kids now, if we educate them early and we give them the resources and tools they need and access to care, we will be able to tackle this issue for the long run. And that's why our main targets of partners are New York City School, Department of Education, and Ministry of Health, or any companies that provide toothbrushes or oral care products. We want to partner with them to not only give the kids the education and knowledge, but also the resources they need to maintain healthy habits for life. And so initially it was a school program where we go to the school, one-on-one interaction with the kids. But because of the COVID situation, we were forced to close the programs because there were no school. And that's when we quickly turned into a virtual classroom where we use the same model in partnership with Google Classrooms to every day for 10 weeks, we have trained volunteer professionals who teaches the kids about oral health topics one every day for the next for every 10 weeks per semester. And then we work with the school principal to then ship the supplies of toothbrushes to them and oral health products so the kids can have the supplies for an entire year so that they can brush their teeth properly. And I think.
Oh, sorry, John Paul, I was just going to say, I mean, it's really an interesting model you've created, and I don't want to sort of cut you off, but I want to make sure we get everybody in. So as we sort of begin to move forward, I would love to hear more about what you are doing as you, I find the earthquake situation being sort of your cognizant sort of awakening, right? It started this whole path, really interesting. But in the spirit of time, do you mind if we sort of pause and we've got 2 more to get in? And
sure,
then we can come back. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I've got, it's me with technology. There we go. Sorry. The World Feeding Program. Thank you, Jean-Paul.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mohammed.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity to participate in P3 Impact. Today we'll talk about Iraq National School Feeding Program, which is funded by the Ministry of Education and implemented by World Food Program in partnership with Nursing Home. The social challenge here is the primary school dropout. Universal access to education is one of the most important goals for sustainable development and a necessary condition for community development. But decades of conflict and lack of investment have severely limited learning outcome for children across Iraq. Recent studies in Iraq shows that only 54% of children from poorer background do not complete primary education, and many of them end up in informal job market, vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. Schools in rural areas in particular have limited capacity to address the need of the most vulnerable children. Many of them live in conditions of extreme poverty and often forced to leave early the school for work or they are not enrolled at all. As the current economic crisis increases the rural communities, parents even less able to provide their children basic needs. In rural areas, many poor or orphan children drop out of school due to the family's lack of financial resources to provide for children basic needs like food and access to learning material. It's critical to ensure that the children are properly fed and are able to attend school in their early years. As in this period, child's newly developed brain is highly plastic and responsive to change. And how the partnership going to address it through the provision of adequate nutrition across access to good quality education and safety and protection. The school feeding program attracts many children back to school, incentivizes families to keep sending their children to school while also providing strong boost to the local economy, as all the fruits, vegetables, all the material are priced locally. Providing meals to school help children who are especially in need, such as orphans, disabled children, or children from low-income families, by removing the barriers to access classes and learning opportunities. The school feeding project in the first year has targeted 11 among the poorest districts in Iraq, reaching more than 1,000 schools and more than 321,000 students. And in order to gather the statistics and number and information for the program implementation, the partner consulted with the Iraqi Ministry of Planning and Ministry of Education and with relevant governmental departments, which provide us with the list of school-aged children in the targeted areas. In coordination also with the schools, we received a list of students actually registered and attending classes. We were therefore able to compare the list and assess the current level of school attendance and dropouts in the targeting areas.
Mohammed, thank you. Again, in the interest of time, we're going to unpack more of that in the breakout sessions, but I love hearing about the reach you've had, the schools, and how you're using lists to verify or validate the model of impact so far. So all on a great path, but we're gonna move, I think, to Halima, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
And I am not sure, Helena, I'm going to leave it here because it appears that
it's the fifth project, yes, right before it. The Unspoken Smile, it's before.
Did I skip over it? Oh, I skipped over it. I apologize. I'm so sorry. That was unintentional. It's called My Hand Hit the Computer. Sorry.
No, it's completely fine.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Is my sound clear? Okay. So I'm Halimatu Sadia. I'm from Spriha, Bangladesh, and we work with the ICT division of the government on a partnership project, which is called Skills for Decent Employment, SDE. So right now, Bangladesh is going through a youth boom. The number of young population is very high in our country, and every year more than 2 million youth join workforce in Bangladesh. And interestingly, more than 500,000 youths fall under the NEET category, N-E-E-T, who are not in education or not in employment or not under any training program. So this shows a significant gap between demand of the market for skilled workers and supply of the market for skilled workers. And there is a and we have a statistics that youth cannot access quality skills training programs because they lack in available stipend, available funding, and there is a gap between the employer and the training agencies which are supposed to ensure quality training. So we thought of a solution that with the government agencies, we can establish a framework which will cooperate on skills development, innovation, and employment generation. So through using this framework, Spriha will gather potential trainees and connect them with the funding opportunities on different training programs provided by the government, and will help them with apprenticeship or job placement later after they have completed their training successfully. And throughout the partnership, A2I, the ICT division of Government of Bangladesh, will provide technical support and public and private stakeholder engagement related support. They're the government agencies, so they can give us permission, they can connect us with different stakeholders where we need special permissions and course designs. And this is a 5 years long partnership, and at the end of this partnership, we want to see that we have at least helped 1,000 youths in developing necessary skills and job replacement. So for the project to run successfully, we need a few things, that is a well-researched list of necessary skills which are in demand in the market, and A2I already has that, and they have published a list of skills which are in the demand of the market. and a list of potential trainees who are interested in this skills training programs. So SPRIHA being the root level nonprofit organization, and we have a strong partnership network through the country, we have the opportunity to access to natives even from the remote areas. And of course, A2I being the government agencies, they have also that access, and they complement SPRIHA on that. And the interesting thing is, the main theme of this partnership is raising fund for those training programs. And SPRIHA already works with NRBs in other programs. NRBs means non-returning Bangladeshis who live outside Bangladesh, and they give back to the society. They donate to their natives people to building back a safe society and a prosperous society. So SPRIHA has the pool of donors to whom we can connect to those youths, and from those fundings we can train these youths for better job replacement. And we signed this partnership back in 2019, actually in late 2019. So 2019. So just when we started processing for collecting trainees and started connecting them with the donors, the pandemic happened, and most of the skills training programs are face-to-face, plumbing, hardware development, and everything. So our program is right now on hold, and we are trying to take it online and work on those communications skills and soft skills so that we can take it further and make some good progress.
So I actually muted myself, so let me unmute myself. Thank you so much for that. So I want you to go back. I'm going to move us forward quickly. And what I want you to do, we don't have time to sort of give feedback, but I want you to think through right now, just in your head, sort of what you heard, what resonated, and what sort of went through. Because one of the things that you find is that when you're asked to do this, it's a lot harder than it seems, right? Doing the elevator pitch is really tough, because the one thing I could tell that was consistent across all of you is that you're very passionate about what you are doing. And when you become passionate about what you're doing, you want to talk all about it, right? You want to write all about it. And the problem is the people on the other side don't sort of know and don't understand to some degree and can't handle all the information, right? So one of the things you've got to think about, and that's what Brian's going to spend time talking about, is what is it that you can do to take all that information and all that expertise and all that passion you have for that issue that you're about to address, and get it out with as much impact as possible. All right. So I'm going to now turn this over to Brian. Brian, you just cue me on the slides, okay?
I will. Thank you. This one's perfect for right now.
Okay.
So I would just echo that. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories. As Mary Margaret said, you know, even though I don't speak Spanish as well, I was able to hear in the voice that authentic passion, right, for the projects that you guys are working on. So that really comes through. I'm going to talk a little bit about the art of storytelling, but I want to actually share a story with you. You share a story with us. I'm going to share a quick story with you. Storytelling can be incredibly powerful, right? When I was a young boy, I was about 4 years old, my great-grandfather was an amazing storyteller. He would sit my brother and I on his knee, and he would tell us stories about where he had come from. My great-grandfather lived in a neighborhood where every single house looked exactly the same. They were all white, they all had black shutters, except for my great-grandfather's house. My great-grandfather had cut these out of wood, these little circles, and put them on his shutters. And that has the shamrock, which is the symbol of the country that he had come to America from. So when he was 16 years old, his parents, he was the oldest of 7 children, his parents put him on a boat and sent him to America so that he could get a job in America and send money back to his family to help his family out. As I got older, I realized that my great-grandfather's stories about Ireland that he would tell my brother and I, he would tell us about all the beautiful places where he had grown up, right? It still meant a lot to him, even though he was in his 90s. And as I got older, I realized that he wasn't just telling me these stories to delight me. He was telling me to go back. He was telling me to go back to that place where he had never gotten to return to, right? So my junior year in college, I spent in Ireland. I was fortunate enough to get to study in Ireland. I got to walk in his footsteps through some of the places that he described. And there was one place that had always stood out to me as a child, and I had always wanted to see what this place looked like. There was no internet, right? So I had never seen a picture of this mountain pass that was right by his home. And it was when I went there, I had this imagination that it was going to be this incredible place, and it was even more beautiful. It's a mountain road called the Connor Pass. And I was so moved. My grandfather's story not only moved me to go across the ocean and study in Ireland, but when my first son was born, we named him Connor after that road because it had these deep family connections for us. And so at a very early age, like my great-grandfather's stories showed me that stories are enormously powerful. They can be enormously powerful, and they actually can spur people to do things that they otherwise would not have done. Right? Without my grandfather's stories, I would have studied in America for all 4 years that I was in college as an undergrad, and I certainly wouldn't have, chosen that particular name for my son. What I'd like to do is take a few minutes and have a conversation, because we all come from families, right? We all have family and friends that tell stories. We all are practiced storytellers. We just often don't think about how do we connect that to what we're doing in our workplace, right? But those same skills, they apply, right? We can use them. So what I'd like to do, and you can raise your hand in the participant window if you'd like to comment, but what do you think are some of the qualities? What are some aspects that make somebody a good storyteller or make a story powerful? If you don't raise a hand, I can just call on somebody too, because I mean,
I know this is not meant for me, but I will get started.
Okay.
Just to kick us off, I think in hearing people speak, one of the things that I found very powerful was when they were able to connect the context that drove them to build a partnership, the challenge they were able to, or the challenge they were seeking to address through their intervention, and then why that partnership, the partners were uniquely situated to be doing that. And each of you did this throughout in some way and I thought that really helped tie everything. It made a story for me. I understood through a narrative what was going on. So having those different pieces together was helpful.
Yeah, so a narrative really helps people understand like what's driving people to do this. Why are you doing this? Why are you involved? Why are the different partners involved? Halima, what do you think?
I think when a story has a personal touch, that makes it unique, and that makes what a person a good storyteller when he or she has a personal touch with the story, and his or her voice shows the passion about the story.
Yeah, so that sense of a personal connection can add an emotional element to it, right? I'm guessing that many of you had the same reaction when Jean-Paul was telling us about going back to Haiti and seeing the smiles of the children, right? Like, I clearly understood exactly like why he's doing what he's doing with just that one simple image. So what else can make a story credible? What else can make a story powerful?
I think the why is very important because for me, my goal in life, my purpose in life wasn't really to be in the nonprofit sector, but the tragedy changed me. And And it was because of that that I was able to really find my calling in life and totally embrace it until now, despite all the issues that I faced while building the organization, despite the rejections, and all that kept me going because I found myself in the story, you know, and help build credibility with it, even though at that time I didn't know how to really tell it. Uh, because I was in my mind, I was very conscious about my Haitian accent and didn't want to like really put myself out there to tell it, but which was also a mistake where I was only using pictures to tell the story. It was good, it attracted a few people, but beyond that, it wasn't successful because I wasn't out there telling the story on how I was able to do that. And I think once I shifted the focus to that, it helped me build more credibility and more attractions and more results around that.
Yeah, so if you're able to describe in your storytelling, like how you became connected to that story, it creates a gateway for other people to say, you know, maybe I care about that too, right? I think being able to kind of display that and describe that personal connection can be very powerful. All right, any other suggestions before we move on? What are some other things that make a story powerful?
I think that maybe the expression of our face is also a quality for good storytelling. It has to be with the emotions.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So there have been research studies on people that are selling. And so one way that you can think about telling your story is that you're kind of selling your ideas or you're selling the project in some way. And that body language tends to contribute about 55 to 58% to whether that person is successful. Vocal tone, which we've talked a bit about, is over 30%. And the actual message, the actual words that you're saying, is between 7 and 10%. Right? So it's kind of surprising, but you're absolutely right. Like body language and your vocal tone, and I'll kind of connect some of those ideas in a minute, but that really contributes to like how authentic is this person in terms of the story that they're telling me, right? So it can be hard to do, but to some extent we have to let go of our self-consciousness when we're telling our story and just be ourselves, right? Because if we're thinking about how other people are thinking about us as we're telling it, right, those emotions don't flow, but it's actually those emotions and the kind of visible pieces of that through our body movement, our facial expressions, and our vocal tone that actually connect people to us. Anything else? Anything else that stands out to you as being important in storytelling that actually has an impact? Katie, you have a hand up?
Yeah. Well, just one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is really words are important, but compelling visual imagery, I think, is also really important because that can encapsulate so much.
Yeah, well, that's great. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on, because one of the things that, you know, a lot of times people think about numbers as being dry. And so if you can visualize some of the impacts that you're having, even if they're kind of more mathematical, and you can actually, you know, show those in a chart or a graph in a powerful way, then it actually can, you know, people can actually have emotional reactions to graphs. I know that sounds strange, but it's actually true. Okay, Mary Mark, could you go to the next slide, please? So one of the things that I wanted to talk about briefly is that the modes of persuasion that we use when we're trying to engage people and kind of share our story with others are really important. But the type of importance is not equal. So the most important thing in terms of, you know, how you actually persuade people to get involved in your story, when my kids were little, I would tell them stories at night. And when I knew that the story was pretty good, they always would want me to make up a story. And when I would understand that, like, I was telling a pretty good story, is when they would want me to put them into the story. And so in some ways, when you're telling the story of your public-private partnership, what you're really wanting people to do is to get involved with you, right? You're trying to get them to take some sort of action that's related to your partnership. The single most important factor of that is, like, do they perceive you as credible and authentic, right? So that's why, like I'm saying, you know, you really want to, it's okay to let those emotions show. It's okay to have an accent, right? That's fine. That's part of who you are. It's part of where you're from. The second most important factor is appealing to people's emotions, right? That's what tends to get people engaged, and what helps to really inspire people to do something that they might not otherwise have done. And then lastly, arguments based on reason. So a lot of times people think that that's the most important part, and it is, because you can't really make a convincing case without logic and reason. But in terms of impact, you know, in some ways, it's the cart following the horse. So the point isn't to choose any one of these different types of appeals, but to figure out how do you make them all work together in unison, so that you can show that you have a logical argument for why your partners are connected, but you're also able to explain, like, why people should be inspired by this, why people should get excited about the work that you're doing. And then also being able to connect, as Jean-Paul was talking about, like, what's your personal connection to this in a way that makes you a credible speaker on behalf of this issue. Next slide, Mary Margaret. Thank you. So I just wanted to quickly mention that there are some major types of business storytelling that can be impactful for the type of work that you do. One of the most common is what we would call vision stories. And that's stories about, here's the way the world looks now, right? But the vision is, here's the way we want it to look, right? Here's the difference that we want to make. Here's the change that we envision we can help make happen in the world. Who I am stories, right? Those are stories that tell people, that give people a little bit of insight into what motivates you as a person, right? Who you are, where you've come from, why you're involved in that effort. Why I am here stories. That means that's really, it's not as much about identity as about, like Jean-Paul was saying, why he got motivated, why this became the calling of his life. And then the last type of story is a little bit different. It's when you're dealing with people that are a little bit skeptical, right? People that you feel the bar to convince them is going to be a little bit more difficult. And these are called I know what you're thinking stories. So if you know that someone is skeptical of a pitch that you're going to be making, you can begin by addressing that directly and say, hey, I know you may be skeptical about this, but let me give me an opportunity to reshape how you think a little bit. So these are not mutually exclusive stories. I would say that most types of stories that you tell are going to have some element of a who I am story. They're going to give people some sort of insight into who you are. Even how you tell a story kind of gives a little bit of insight into who you are, you know, whether you're intending to do it or not, because a lot of the body language that we have, the signals that we send to other people, it's unconscious, right? It's not something that we can control. These are just, and you'll have these slides to take away. We also have a little bit of time for questions at the end. But these are some different ways of thinking about, as you're speaking with different stakeholders who might have different positions or different perspectives, different types, you might want to reshape your story a little bit in terms of, like, what mode are you using? So you can tell the same story, essentially the same facts, but tell it in a slightly different way that might connect better with that particular audience. Next slide, Mary Margaret. Okay. So as Katie mentioned, right, visuals are really important. So I know, for example, you know, if you remember one thing that I said, it's probably going to be my story about my grandfather, and it's probably going to be, right, his shamrock, because I showed you a visual, right? But you can use words to create visuals in people's head as well. That's what my great-grandfather did for me, right? He told me about these like beautiful mountains, like going down to the ocean, and it was just so magical that I had this picture in my head that I had to see it in reality, right? So we can use that visual imagery to powerfully impact people, but we also can do that with data. So one of the most impactful ways that you can share data is actually to create maps that explain to them, visual maps that explain to them either the difference you've made or the challenge, the size of the challenge that you face. Remember, Jean-Paul mentioned, I think it was like 3.8 billion people, right? You know, being able to show a map maybe of the type of impact that you're having, a visual map of the change that you're making, could be really powerful. Go ahead and switch, Mary Margaret. So I'm sorry to run through this, but I want to get to the part where you get to get in breakout rooms. Visuals can be a little bit challenging. You want them to be clear so that people can just like, it's almost like when they look at a picture, they see it so that it doesn't have so many elements that it's confusing. You want to make sure that it's concise and it's something that's engaging. You also want to make sure that it's viewed as credible by your audience. So for example, if you're showing a bar graph that has like, you know, different heights of bars, you always want whatever that baseline is to be 0, right? Because if you can kind of resize things if you don't set your baseline at 0, which then can cause people to question the credibility of that chart. Next slide, Mary Margaret. It's also important to know that there's a pattern to visual storytelling. So people tend to start with the upper left, and then they move across in the positions here. So wherever you want the most powerful part of your visual of a graph or chart, you always want that #1 spot to have the main message. So instead of saying, you know, number of children receiving dental work, right? You might want to have something that's more explicit that says significant change occurred in these 3 countries, right? So how you title those graphics can tell part of the story, but you always want that most important information located where the eye goes first. Go ahead and switch, Mary Margaret. The other thing is too, is that like a lot of times it doesn't have to be a chart. So if you have some data that's just really important to share. So let's say, for example, that you're running a after-school program in the United States, saying that 20% of the children in the US in 2012 don't have a stay-at-home parent anymore, right? That might be able to help you to show that there's a greater need for after-school programs in the particular area that you serve. Even just making that like bigger and highlighting and using color and putting other information in the background, that can help you to visually tell a particular story. Mary Margaret, go to the next slide, please. All right, there are many things about this graph that I think are useful, but there also are some that I think are not great storytelling. So what this depicts is it depicts obesity in the United States. And so each line depicted in this chart represents one of the 50 states in the United States. And so it's what it depicts is the status, like how many obese people are in that state in 2011 versus how many are obese in 2016. If you look at the 2 orange lines, Virginia and DC, those are the only 2 that are going down. So if you were running a partnership in DC that was focused on decreasing obesity rates, like this would be a really great, this tells a great story for you. The graph could be simplified quite a bit, however, because I think it can be, there's so many lines that it's pretty confusing. Instead of showing all the rising states, all other 47, all other 49 states that are rising along with DC, which is not a state, they could have just showed the average. So instead of having 51 lines, you only have 3. and said, you know, and then the title could just be the impact that they're having in those two regions. Next slide, Mary Margaret. All right, so I know like I threw a ton of information at you very quickly, and I'm sorry to do that. Do you have any questions before we kind of move into the breakout exercise? Hannah?
Yes, just briefly, due to scheduling and because we know the real reason we're here is to learn, right? And to hear from the experts, we will be skipping breakout sessions today, but instead have one partnership kind of return to its pitch, factoring in some of the things Brian shared, but then we'll have an opportunity for group discussion. Because there's only 7 of the cohort, we can really do this in a nice, friendly way. So we'll have some feedback go in.
Hannah?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna stop you just for a sec.
Perfect.
Okay? So what I'd like y'all to do, if you don't mind, is I want everybody that's here to close your eyes. Okay? And I want you to visualize your story. Think about the things that make your skin warm. Think about the things that make your skin cold, about your partnership, about the people involved in your partnership. Okay? I want you, like, I get what I'm trying to do is get you to visualize it. Now, keep your eyes closed. I want you to think about what would be the number, the data, the one thing, not 50 things. But while you have that visualization with your eyes closed, what's the data that would tell that story, that moment, that thing that's in your head right now, that would make people feel what you're feeling right now? Just think about that for a second. Okay, I want you to open your eyes and write it down. And if you came up with more than one, that's okay, but I was trying to get you to focus on one. So, but write it down. Okay, and once you've written it down, maybe just put your hand up like this so I know you're done. Like, I'm done. Thank you, I saw you. Okay. Okay. So I'm looking to see if people are writing. Okay. So the reason I'm asking you to do this is I think we can get lost in all that we want to do, right? But when we sit back and think about this, like think about the story Brian told you and the warmthness of that, and the one visual, right, for me that conveyed that was the shamrock, right? But there's something, there's got to be one message, like there's one thing that needs to stand out for the most, and then from that other things can come versus getting lost in the forest of the data, says the accountant. Okay. Okay, so one of the things you have to think of is sometimes we see all the data and we start to ask and get lost in the data, and it's always good to step back and visualize what you want to say or what you want people to feel, and then ask yourself, what's the one thing, not the 5 things, start with the one thing. So do you mind sharing out that? Can we share out that? Does anybody, Katie, what did you write? Yeah, that's called a cold call, Katie.
Yeah, okay, make sure I understood the question correctly as I was thinking about, you know, various things. I think if there's one thing that is a compelling image that we use a lot is the imagery from the Grand Caldera, like beautiful landscapes, rare animals. Like that's the future that I certainly want to see. And when we think about how to translate that into people and the things that we're trying to create are, you know, basically well-trained educators and park rangers teaching the next generation about wildlife. The things I don't want to see, frankly, people eating monkeys, people eating turtles, which happens a lot. I mean, those are like, if you could think of like those things, those would be.
Okay, Katie, I'm going to stop you for a second then. So I hear you. So that is the picture, the narrative that you want people to see. What numbers help share that, right? Because that's the, like, is there a number about the amount of loss and the bio, like, is it a number about the consequences of our loss in that? Is it a number about the goal that you have? What is the number? So there's the narrative. You just gave us the narrative, right? And we can put pictures for the narrative. But what's the number that will help translate the importance or the impact? What do you think that would be?
The way I would translate that into numbers then would be having no change in the size of a protected area or its degradation. You know, that's one number that we've used in the past. People working in the forest, how many people we have working on the southern beaches or in the Grand Caldera, and how that impacts hunting compared to the rate of sales that we see in the municipal bushmeat market in Malabo. That's kind of like the way we do it. So you see a decline where there's lots of monkeys where we are, not very many sales of monkeys from that area.
Okay, so it's a comparative of the sales of monkeys.
Yeah, and the presence of monkeys in their wild landscape. Yeah.
Okay. So being able to graphically think about that's the impact, that's the like it's almost like that's the problem, right? And then how do we fix it, right? There's a narrative there. Okay. Natalia, sorry. Natalia, what do you think? Thank you, Katie. Oh, she's muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. Well, I thought about the 5 axes. Mm-hmm. Is it correct to say the 5 axes that our development agent is trying to focus for the city, for San Nicolas City? We have a vision, a 2030 vision for the city. The city we want to live, and our children want to live. The 5 axes we are focused on are a productive city, human and integrated city, sustainable city.
Natalia, I'm already going to stop you. This is called integrate. Like, I'm going to like just powwow with you for a second, okay?
Yes.
Tell me the first principle. What was the first principle?
The first one, productive city.
Okay. Productive cities.
Yes.
What is the data that would help describe what that means? I don't know what productive city means, right? And so what is the data that you use to help communicate to me that either this is a problem or we can have impact? I'm trying to get you to think about the metric, the one metric, right? Or the one piece of data that would illuminate for me without a paragraph explaining the problem or right? But because when I listened to you when you were presenting, I loved that you went 5. Like, you did 5, right? And I was like, I keyed in on that immediately. I was like, 5, right? I got it. But then I was like, when you started listing the 5, I was like, I don't know what those mean. Right. Okay. And so, like, what's the impact metric that brings home and brings the emotion to your story about what each of those 5 things are? You with me?
Yes, I understand.
So yeah. Like,
thank you.
How would you know that you won? Like, how would you know that you were successful? Like, is there a number of, is there some data point that would like tell you like, wow, we've achieved our goal, we need to move on to something else?
I don't understand your question. Sorry.
So I'm saying, if you think about like how you want to get to achieve a productive city,
Yes.
What measure would give you a sense of that goal had been achieved? Like, would it be like the number of people who have jobs in the city? Would it be like the average amount of income that people have in the city? Like, is there some type of measurement that would indicate, wow, we really did well? Like, we've been really successful.
Mm-hmm. We talk about the productive city because we have a city that is that needs to diversify the productive matrix of the city. We only have most of the companies here belongs to the metallurgical or mechanical production. So we need more enterprises or more company or new company that can be able to diversify the opportunities for the young people. Mm-hmm. Not only to work for metallurgical problems or to solve that, but to improve the capacity of creating new jobs or new companies for the city.
Okay, that's great. So it sounds to me, well, let me just make sure I understood you right. Because what it sounded to me was that one way of knowing that you were successful is if more people, if there were a greater percentage of people in the city who are employed in non-metallurgical industry jobs, right? Yes. So if where people are working, if that changes significantly so that you get people in other types of industries, that would be a measure of success.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you.
So then the question becomes, this is great. So once you have that metric in mind, yeah. Right, then the question then becomes, how do you get the data? And sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes the data's not there, right? And that's tough. But sometimes there might be something that's close enough that it works, given constraints, or sometimes it might be, yeah, it's not there, but it's really not that hard. Or it could be, this is a great place for a partnership, right? This is, maybe there is data out there, but we need to think more broadly about our partnership and include people who can help us get that data, right? Because one of the things when you think about, once you think about your metrics and your storytelling, that's important because people are going to want to know your outcomes. Right? And so when you think about your outcomes and you want to tell your story, you've got to have some mechanisms in place, even if they're rudimentary, to have some data to be able to show your outcomes, okay? And some of those outcomes could be numbers, and then some of those outcomes could be stories. And what we've seen in our P3 applications a lot of times is that there's a lot of stories, but not as much data. And you need both. You need both the narrative, because the narrative gives you the emotional context, right? It helps me understand, like when Jean-Paul gave me the personal narrative, right? That was so, it captured my attention. But then he gave me big numbers. I actually don't remember exactly the number, but I wrote down big number with disease, right? And so the fact that he could cite that number, and then he gave me another number, and I wrote, oh, it was from Haiti to 8 countries. And I wrote, okay, that's telling me the growth. So that for me in my head, I'm thinking, I got the growth, I understand, right? And so by giving me those numbers and then telling me sort of, if you're pitching to me, right, I want to know if I'm investing in you, whether it's time or energy or resources, what we should expect, right? So if you're pitching to me at the beginning, I want to know that you've thought ahead of time about what it is that the outcome that you expect. And if you're able to show me that information, or even some kind of path towards how you're gonna, well, actually not in the elevator. Don't tell me about your path to collecting it during the elevator. Okay, but again, just trying to, because what you can then do, right, is it's not a paragraph that you have to speak. It's a few words, maybe, and some data. That can be much more impactful than a paragraph, right? And the visual of the data will walk away with me. I may not remember all the words. Like, I can't even remember the number John Paul said, except I remember going, holy cow, that's big.
Yeah.
That's 3.5 billion.
Thank you. Sorry,
But,
Brian.
you know, and I noticed you posted that in the window as well, Jean Paul. You know, what if the number is huge? And one of the things that we do know is that oftentimes the size of a number does not get people emotionally involved.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, like, the size of that number, like, it tells people, wow, there is a huge problem here, right? So then that argument's over. You don't have to argue that there's a problem. But then to Hannah's point, how do you actually then get people inspired? Well, you tell the story of one person, right? And you tell the story of how they were impacted by this. And then, you know, every person that you help, that makes a difference, right? That makes a difference. And so what you're not asking people to fix 3.5 billion. You're saying help somebody, right? We're helping somebody. We can't do it all. We're not trying to say that we are, but we're going to make a difference.
But if I could add, I think, Jean Paul, one of the strengths of your narrative is really showing that you're not going to solve it for everyone, but you've built in a model of scale into your partnership. You've identified the nodes that can make impact at large numbers, right? And you've figured out which partners need to be a part of that, and how you can at least start to make progress in that big number range. You're not messing around with small numbers in your partnership. Like, that's one thing that we all took away from your application. And so it's just about connecting all these pieces so that when you're telling the story, the average person who wants to become a part of it understands how they can be a part of it.
So one of the things I want to be sensitive to is time. And we're coming to the close at 1:30. And so I would open it up. I'm happy to stay on and for a few minutes and take questions. But I want to be sensitive to the fact that we are at 1:30. And so maybe, Hannah, I'm not sure what you would like us to do with that. I mean, I can offer to stay for a few minutes.
I can as well.
If that would be helpful. And if people, like, it's late at night in places.
Yeah.
Or that we also allow you the freedom to go to sleep.
Yeah, and to dream about big numbers. So then, just to kind of close the loop here, so people can decide if they wish to stay on for 10 more minutes or if they want to move forward with their day or evening. Next steps. On Monday, you will receive an email that includes this recording, the slides that Brian and Mary Margaret put together. We will also provide tailored specific feedback from the P3 cohort that we took while you were presenting your story, things that we noticed and that you may wish to factor in or really bring up, because we'll celebrate both what we thought were strengths, but also areas that based on today's lesson, you may choose to work on. So we will provide specific feedback. We will also provide ways for us to stay coordinated and connected in between our learning modules through a Slack channel. And if people are interested, we can create a WhatsApp group as well. And this will be a place for sharing resources. If you see something, if I see something about Equatorial Guinea, right? Like, I'd want to put it in there so all of us can talk about how that affects these two amazing partnerships that are part of this cohort, right? So it's a good place to be continuously sharing insight, ideas, resources, and keep this conversation going. We had a really great, as a recap today, a really great opportunity to hear about each of your partnerships and to directly from you, and then to hear about the power of storytelling and how to tie in impact data and different narrative techniques to make that storytelling more compelling, so that when you have 30 seconds in an interview with a potential partner, funder, sponsor, amplifier, or other stakeholder, they get what you're doing and they get excited about what they're trying to do. And that's a big piece of what this accelerator is trying to do. We want to position each and every one of you in a proverbial elevator. None of us are getting in elevators right now. It's not safe. But we would like to put you in a room, in a conversation, in a space where you will have that opportunity to be presenting. And we'll all work towards that for the Concordia Annual Summit, which will take place September 21st to 25th, and to which you are all invited to as our guests from this cohort. You will have those pitch opportunities. So we want to prepare you for that. So that is what we did today. I would love to keep this room open for 10 more minutes. We can use a little bit more of Mary Margaret and Brian's insight. We can ask questions and we can chat further. So if you're able to stay on, please do stay on. And if not, we wish you the best, and we'll be in touch over the week, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.